In 2015, Alison Krauss stepped onto a stage in Utah, opened her mouth to sing, and nothing came out. Her bandmate had to finish the song while she walked off in silence. This wasn't stage fright, it was something far worse, something that would keep her away from music for years. By 2023, it happened again in Las Vegas. She disappeared mid-song and never returned. For a woman with 28 Grammys, the silence was deafening. What really happened to one of the greatest voices in American music? The answer is more painful than anyone expected. Alison Krauss was born on July 23, 1971, in Decatur, Illinois, a town of about 90,000 people. Her father, Fred, came to the U.S. from Germany in 1952 when he was only 12. He didn't speak English at first, but worked his way through school and eventually earned a doctorate in psychology before switching to real estate. Her mother, Louise, came from a mix of Italian and German roots and worked as an illustrator, creating artwork for educational books and local magazines. Their home was full of both books and music. Psychology journals stacked next to classical vinyl records, a place where art and intellect blended naturally. It was a small two-bedroom house, but it held big dreams. From the very beginning, Alison grew up with this mix of old-world culture and American ambition all around her. When she was still a toddler, the family moved to Champaign, Illinois. They lived just a few blocks from the University of Illinois, where her parents had first met in the 60s. The neighborhood buzzed with professors, artists, and curious kids. The Krannert Center had opened just a few years earlier, bringing orchestras and musicians right to their doorstep. On weekends, the radio played everything from bluegrass to rock, and local coffee houses filled with folk songs. This wasn't just any Midwestern town. It was a place where kids grew up watching world-class performances and listening to their neighbors talk about physics and poetry over dinner. In this kind of place, chasing excellence didn't feel strange. It felt expected. By the time she was 5, her mother decided it was time for music lessons. Alison didn't agree. She wanted to roller skate and draw with crayons, not practice scales. But Louise insisted, enrolling her in violin lessons with a stern local teacher who charged $8 for a half hour. The Suzuki method ruled everything back then. Memorize, repeat, sit straight, bow exactly right. Alison found it boring and often cried during practice. Still, every day she kept at it, 30 minutes without fail, even when it felt like a chore. Her teacher corrected every tiny movement, but slowly, Alison's fingers got faster and more precise. Even if she didn't love it yet, the foundation was forming. Then came a summer afternoon in 1979 that would change everything. Just 8 years old, Alison went with her family to the Champaign County Fair and wandered over to the Bluegrass Fiddle Contest. The stage wasn't fancy, and the players wore jeans, not tuxedos, but the energy was electric. She watched as musicians tore through Orange Blossom Special like their bows were on fire. Alison stood there wide-eyed, mesmerized. That same day, she begged to learn bluegrass. Her classical teacher reluctantly showed her the rhythms and bow patterns. In just 3 months, she stood on that same stage and played Orange Blossom Special in front of 200 people. Her bow arm moved like it had a life of its own. She won first place and a $50 prize, along with a trophy nearly her size. Local papers called her a prodigy. That fairground stage did something a fancy concert hall never could. It gave her a spark that classical music never lit. Back at home, her older brother, Victor, was also deep into music, though his path was different. He played jazz piano and bass, studying Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. Their rooms were filled with very different sounds. Allison working on bluegrass, Victor playing synth pop and jazz. Gary Newman's Cars was on their record player one week, followed by Led Zeppelin or Stevie Wonder. Their house wasn't a shrine to tradition, it was an experiment in sound. Victor later went on to play bass for Lyle Lovett and record with Grammy-winning artists. That wide-open and genre-blending world they lived in would later explain why Allison wasn't afraid to step beyond bluegrass and collaborate with artists like Robert Plant. When Allison was 12, she won the Illinois State Fiddle Championship. It was a big year. That September, her parents bought her first adult-sized violin, handmade in Missouri. A huge investment for the family. The Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass in America named her the most promising fiddler in the Midwest, and Vanity Fair called her a virtuoso. But the road wasn't easy. Almost every weekend they were on the move, driving from contest to contest, sometimes hitting 3 in one weekend. She was nicknamed the Contest Queen. While other kids played sports or went to birthday parties, she was on the road chasing one win after another. A year later, she won the Walnut Valley Festival in Kansas, one of the toughest fiddle contests in the country, but one memory stuck even more. Around age 11, during a national competition in Weiser, Idaho, a girl told her, "Don't worry, my bowing used to be just as bad as yours." Allison didn't cry or sulk. She got a cassette tape of that girl's favorite fiddler, Bart Trotter, and practiced every single note until she nailed them all. That moment, that sting, became the push that took her from good to relentless. At 14, she stepped into the recording studio for the first time. The album was called Different Strokes, recorded in Flora, Illinois, with her brother Victor on bass and a few other local musicians. They played traditional tunes like Sally Gooden and Dusty Miller and On Gray Eagle. Allison let loose with wild improvisations that critics later called jaw-dropping. The album didn't go far. The label was tiny and distribution was limited, but it gave her studio experience and a taste of what was coming. That same year, everything changed again. Rounder Records founder Ken Irwin heard a demo tape from a band called Classical Grass. Allison mostly played fiddle, but on one gospel song she sang lead. That voice, just one track, stopped Irwin in his tracks. He listened to every demo tape that came in. But this one was different. He didn't want her for her fiddle alone. He wanted that voice. In 1985, she signed with Rounder Records at just 14. By May 1986, they were in Nashville recording her debut solo album. It would be called Too Late to Cry, and it would come out the following year when Allison turned 16. While other kids were going to dances and learning to drive, Allison was already working as a session musician. She had joined a band called Silver Rail at 12, replacing fiddler Andrea Eowaj. She played in country dance bands, at bars, at festivals, sometimes the only teenager in a room full of adults. She recorded fiddle parts for other artists by 15. Her life had skipped over high school fun and jumped straight into the grind of a full-blown music career. In 1987, Too Late to Cry hit the shelves. It had 11 tracks recorded in Nashville, and critics were quick to notice. The Washington Post said her soprano was piercing and pure, while her fiddle playing brought tunes to life. The Philadelphia Inquirer said she had a jazzy swing to her style, rare for young players who were usually stiff. The album mixed original songs by John Pannell with traditional tunes running just under 36 minutes. It wasn't flashy, but it was clear. Alison Krauss had arrived. Later that same year, she joined Union Station, the bluegrass band that would carry her through the next chapters. She took over from Andrea Zahn, the same fiddler she'd met back at the Champaign County Fair years earlier. The band included Jeff White on guitar, John Pennell on bass, and Mike Harmon on banjo. Her voice had stunned Pannell years before during an audition when she sang Blue Kentucky Girl. He knew then she wasn't just a fiddler, she was a star in the making. Their first album together, Two Highways, came out in 1989. It earned a Grammy nomination. The album featured traditional tracks like Wild Bill Jones and even a bluegrass version of Midnight Rider by the Allman Brothers. Jerry Douglas played dobro and Brent Trout added mandolin. At just under 39 minutes, it was packed with layered instrumentation and tight harmonies. Some critics said her voice was too soft in the mix, but others compared her to Dolly Parton. They began touring across the country. From the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco to Owensboro in Kentucky, they drew larger crowds. By 1990, they were performing at major bluegrass festivals, including the Doyle, Lawson, and Quicksilver Festival. Recordings from these shows captured Allison playing Steel Rails and Sweet Georgia Brown with precision and fire. In 1991, at just 19, Allison won her first Grammy for Best Bluegrass Recording. The song was I've Got That Old Feeling, and it came from her 1990 solo album of the same name. She handled both lead vocals and harmonies. The album climbed to number 61 on the Billboard Country Albums chart. That same year, her first music video reached number 1. At the time, she became the second youngest Grammy winner in history, a title she held for years. That golden trophy wasn't just an award, it was a door, and it opened wide. In August 1990, when Alison Krauss was just 19, she released her second solo album. It was called I've Got That Old Feeling, and it marked the first time she climbed onto the mainstream country charts, reaching number 61 the following year. The album was co-produced by Jerry Douglas, who played the dobro, and Bill Vorndick. It had top-notch bluegrass musicians like Sam Bush, Stuart Duncan, and Allison Brown. The title song, written by Sidney Cox, gave Krauss her very first Grammy. That was at the 33rd Grammy Awards, and she was still a teenager. The music had a blend of bluegrass, country, and soft pop that started shaping her own sound. One that would eventually find a place far beyond bluegrass circles. By 1994, Krauss wasn't just singing. She stepped into the role of producer for the first time. She worked with the Cox family on a gospel album called I Know Who Holds Tomorrow. It was recorded in Nashville and featured members of Union Station like Ron Block and Barry Bales. The album had 12 tracks, including covers of Merle Haggard and Paul Simon. It won a Grammy for Best Southern Country or Bluegrass Gospel Album in 1995. That award showed she wasn't just a great performer. She had the vision to shape other people's music too. Then, in 1995, everything changed. She released Now That I've Found You, a collection, a mix of older songs and a few new ones. It exploded. The album sold over 2.1 million copies and went 2x platinum. It reached number 13 on the Billboard 200, number 2 on the Country Albums chart, and hit number 1 in Canada. Her cover of Keith Whitley's When You Say Nothing at All went gold and reached number 3 on Billboard's country chart. Another song, Baby Now That I Found You, reached the top 50 and won her another Grammy. The success showed something that shocked the industry. Bluegrass could actually break into the mainstream. That same year, at just 24, Krauss made history at the Country Music Association Awards. She won 4 big awards in one night. Female Vocalist of the Year, Horizon Award, Single of the Year, and Vocal Event of the Year. It had never happened before, not for any woman. Her album had also been nominated for Album of the Year, but the CMA pulled the nomination because it didn't have enough new material. Even with that setback, the night was a turning point. Her album jumped from number 60 to 25 on the Billboard 200 within a week, with sales more than doubling. In 1997, she and Union Station released So Long, So Wrong, which reached number 4 on the country albums chart, their highest yet. It was also the first album featuring Dan Tyminski, whose voice and guitar became part of their sound moving forward. The album won 3 Grammys, one for Looking in the Eyes of Love, another for Little Liza Jane, and a third for Best Bluegrass Album. Critics praised how the band stayed away from flashy playing or pop trends and focused on something quieter, more thoughtful. In 1999, Krauss went solo again with Forget About It, which hit number 5 on the country albums chart. The title track reached number 67 on the singles chart, and another song, Stay, broke into the adult contemporary chart at number 28. The album leaned more toward pop, with covers of Todd Rundgren and Michael McDonald's songs. The final track even had Dolly Parton and Lyle Lovett on it. Everyone could see Krauss was moving far beyond just bluegrass, but still keeping her unmistakable voice and heart in every note. In 2001, she released New Favorite Right as the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou soundtrack took the world by surprise. Krauss sang Down to the River to Pray on that soundtrack, and the album went on to sell over 8 million copies in the US alone. New Favorite did well too, going gold and winning 3 Grammys. One of those wins was for The Lucky One, which took home both Best Country Song and Best Performance by a Duo or Group. By now, Krauss had become one of the most awarded artists in Grammy history. And that wasn't just because of one project. Every step had built to this. In 2004, Union Station released Lonely Runs Both Ways, which won them 3 more Grammys. Songs like Restless, Union House Branch, and A Living Prayer proved they were still pushing boundaries. The album even included a Woody Guthrie cover and songs by Robert Lee Castleman and Gillian Welch. Critics said Union Station was probably the tightest band in bluegrass, and the album raised the bar once again. Then came the live album in 2002, recorded in Kentucky. It went 2x platinum and won 2 Grammys, including one for Cluck Old Hen. Fans loved hearing songs like The Lucky One and Baby, Now That I've Found You performed live. Critics called it a near-perfect collection. Her voice found another home in film soundtracks too. In Cold Mountain, she performed You Will Be My Ain't True Love and The Scarlet Tide, songs written by Sting, T-Bone Burnett, and Elvis Costello. Both tracks were nominated for Oscars in 2004. Krauss even sang them live at the Academy Awards in front of over 43 million viewers. First with Sting, then with Costello. It was a huge moment. Bluegrass vocals reaching the biggest stage in Hollywood. In 2007, she released a compilation album called 100 Miles or More, which included her best soundtrack hits, duets with Brad Paisley and James Taylor, and some new material. It debuted at number 10 on the Billboard 200 and number 3 on the country chart. But it was also in 2007 that something completely unexpected happened. Krauss teamed up with Robert Plant, the legendary rock singer from Led Zeppelin. Their album Raising Sand debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, eventually sold over 1 million copies, and won 6 Grammys, including Album of the Year and Record of the Year. The songs were haunting atmospheric, and unlike anything either artist had done before. Their voices melted together in a way no one could have predicted. The album featured songs by Tom Waits, Gene Clark, and Townes Van Zandt. It was a bold move, and it worked. They toured for nearly 2 years, performing in packed theaters and iconic venues like Madison Square Garden. Songs like Gone, 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 Please Read the Letter, and Killing the Blues were crowd favorites. The tour showed that what they'd created in the studio could hold its power live. In 2011, Krauss returned with Union Station for Paper Airplane. It was their first studio album in 7 years, and it was worth the wait. It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and won 2 more Grammys, including Best Bluegrass Album. Krauss also convinced engineer Mike Shipley to return to the studio after a long break, and the result was one of their most polished records. Songs by Jackson Browne and Richard Thompson gave the album extra emotional weight. But shortly after, Krauss hit a wall. She was diagnosed with dysphonia, a condition that made singing painful. It took her years to recover. Windy City, released in 2017, was her return. It was a solo album full of classic covers from the 1960s. It debuted at number 1 on the country and bluegrass charts and number 5 on the Billboard 200. She credited a vocal coach with helping her find her voice again, and it worked. The album reminded everyone that Krauss was still one of America's most unique and gifted voices. In 2021, she and Robert Plant reunited. Their second album, Raise the Roof, debuted at number 7 on the Billboard 200 and earned 3 Grammy nominations. Critics said it was deeper, smokier, and richer than their first. It featured songs by Merle Haggard, the Everly Brothers, and even a new original. Their chemistry was still there. Krauss said, the moment she heard one particular song, Quattro, she knew they had to make another album together. Alison Krauss met Pat B. Urges in the thick of Nashville's music scene in 1996. They didn't waste time. Just 24 days after they started dating, they were married. It happened on November 8, 1997, quietly and suddenly, surprising almost everyone around them. She was already a well-known name in bluegrass, famously private and known for taking things slow, but with Pat, it all moved fast. He was a talented guitarist who had played with people like Lyle Lovett and Cadet Atkins, so musically they made sense. Still, in a place like Nashville, where everyone knows everyone, people noticed how quickly it happened. At the same time, Alison's career was taking off, and their private life started under a lot of public pressure. On July 17, 1999, their son Sam was born. Alison didn't slow down. She kept touring with Union Station, bringing Sam with her. Even with the chaos of life on the road, she gave him a voice early. He picked the music they played in the car. Alison said she learned from her father that letting young people choose music is a way of respecting who they are. Sam grew up in that world, surrounded by sound, and eventually picked up drums, guitar, and even sang, but only at home. Alison never said much about her family in public, but when she did, it was clear that motherhood had reshaped how she saw the world. In August 2001, Alison and Pat divorced. It ended after 4 years, and no big story ever came out of it. They kept things quiet. The court gave Alison full custody of Sam, who was only 2 years old. The non-stop touring and pressures of her career had worn down the relationship. After the split, she leaned on her band and her family to get through it. Pat eventually married Annie Selich, another Nashville musician, while Alison focused on raising her son and moving forward on her own terms. From that point on, she became even more guarded about her personal life. In 2007, whispers started. Allison had recorded a duet with John Waite. His classic Missing You and their live shows together sparked rumors. Their chemistry on stage turned into tabloid headlines. Fans speculated they were dating, and gossip sites claimed they'd been together for years. But it wasn't true. There was no romance, just respect, admiration, and a deep musical connection. Despite all the noise, neither of them ever confirmed anything. And Allison never remarried. Raising Sam became her focus. She made sure he grew up away from the spotlight. Instead of keeping him at home, she let him tour with her, exposing him to different people, sounds, and places. She gave him space to explore, even letting him guide her on musical choices. Over time, he developed into a skilled musician and started giving her feedback on her own work. In rare interviews, Allison spoke about how strange and emotional it was to watch him grow up and drift into his own world. She kept most of it to herself, but the way she talked about the gospel song, A Living Prayer, gave people a glimpse into how she saw motherhood, quiet, spiritual, and full of trust in the journey. In 2013, everything changed. Allison was diagnosed with dysphonia, a vocal disorder that constricts the throat and makes singing almost impossible. She had to cancel a big show at the IBMA Wide Open Bluegrass Festival. It was supposed to be a huge night with legends like Sam Bush, Bella Fleck, and Tony Rice. Ironically, Tony Rice had battled the same disorder, and now Allison was following in his footsteps in a way no one ever expected. Her team said recovery would be quick, but that didn't happen. It took years. By 2014, things got worse. Her throat would tighten so badly, she couldn't even speak properly. A joint tour with Willie Nelson had to be canceled across several cities. She tried therapy, tried to push through, but the problem stayed. Sometimes she'd step into a studio or onto a stage and have to walk right back out again, unable to get through a single note. In 2015, during a performance in Utah, she opened her mouth and no sound came out. She froze. Her bandmate Dan Tominski had to step in and carry the song. She walked off stage, shaken and embarrassed. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Her voice wasn't just her instrument, it was who she was. During those years, she stayed in Franklin, Tennessee, quietly focusing on fiddle work and producing other artists' records. Shows were canceled, tours disappeared, her website went blank. People started wondering if she'd ever return. In a 2017 interview, she described the feeling as trying to sing through a tiny straw. Studio sessions for her album Windy City dragged on for 3.5 years. Sometimes she'd cancel before the first track was recorded. She said it was the least she'd ever worked on a project that took so long. Eventually, it was Ron Browning, her vocal coach, who helped her find a way back. She said his guidance felt like getting a shot of life again. That album, Windy City, finally came out in February 2017. Her voice was different, a little older, a little huskier, but strong. It was her first solo album in 18 years. The songs carried a lot of weight because she had fought so hard to sing them. Then came Raise the Roof in 2021, a powerful collaboration with Robert Plant. It was proof she was back, but the road was still bumpy. In 2023, during a Las Vegas show, she stepped off stage in the middle of When the Levee Breaks and didn't come back. Plant finished the concert alone. A few days later, she was performing again in New Mexico, like nothing had happened. That's how dysphonia worked. Unpredictable, silent one day, soaring the next. In March 2025, Allison released Arcadia with Union Station. It was their first album together in 14 years. The lead single, Looks Like the End of the Road, had been sitting with her since the COVID lockdowns. When she heard it, she knew it was time. The album hit #1 on the Billboard Bluegrass chart. She had now won 28 Grammys, sold over 12 million albums, and left a bigger mark on American music than almost anyone in her genre. Dan Tyminski left after the album, replaced by Russell Moore, a 6-time male vocalist of the year in bluegrass. Allison produced the whole thing, saying the songs played out like movies in her head. Then came the tour. In April 2025, they kicked off the Arcadia Tour, 73 dates across the U.S. and Canada. Red Rocks, the Greek Theater, the Beacon. It was their first tour in a decade. Krause was clear she still had to manage her voice carefully, but she was back with her bandmates of 40 years. And for the fans, it was more than just a comeback. It felt like the continuation of something rare, something that had survived breakups, silence, illness, and time, and somehow came out the other side with even more soul.